Hello and welcome to the GodisaGeek Retrocast. I am your host Lee Garbett, and joining me is fellow co-host Robin Parker.
Hello there.
This time around we're going to be fighting some people in streets, in subways, everywhere, in wrestling rings, wherever you like, in Final Fight, the Capcom brawler. This is the SNES version we're going to be looking at, and of course the original game was originally on the arcades. Funnily enough, it was actually almost a sequel to the original Street Fighter, originally titled Street Fighter 87. Later on the game was actually changed to a Final Fight to give it a bit more identity.
Yeah, Final Fight was kind of the first really popular brawler of its time. I mean, obviously it was taking some cues from games such as Double Dragon, but Final Fight sort of used the technology available at the time, and specifically stuff which could be ported onto the SNES, because it really showed the powerful graphics, the bigger sprites, the more detail that could be handled at the time, and it was really showed up against its competitors. Where with Sega and their follow-up Streets of Rage, which were trying to compete, it just showed what the SNES could handle, which couldn't have been done previously in this sort of game.
And this is an early Super NES game, it has to be said. As you can see from the character select screen there, we have Cody and Hagar. Absent from this SNES version is Guy, who was in the original arcade machine. Capcom would later fix that with a separate version of the game called Final Fight Guy, but for some reason that was missing Cody.
Yeah, it's a strange one, but they actually re-released the game, but added something in, but then took something else out again. I suppose the memory at the cartridges at the time couldn't handle having 3 characters there. Another thing it unfortunately couldn't handle was the 2-player mode, which was of course in the arcades, and which was who doesn't like to team up with a friend to beat some heads in?
Certainly, and as mentioned, it was that the Final Fight Guy version was released quite late on. I mean, although it was released in Japan in 1992, about 2 years after the original Final Fight, the West didn't actually get Final Fight Guy until 1994, and even then it was only a rental game in Blockbuster stores in America.
That's it was a strange decision. I mean, Blockbuster must have got some sort of exclusivity deal at the time, but I don't think anyone probably was too bothered by 4 years after its original release. Everyone who probably wanted to play the game had probably got enough gameplay out of the original one by then.
Well, let's face it, when you're playing Final Fight, you're only going to pick Hagar anyway.
Yeah, he's definitely the favourite, I think. He's got the best move set. He's a big brawler. I mean, that's what you want. That's what you want when you're playing one of these games. You want to pile drive some heads into the concrete.
I mean, he is pretty much Zangief, as you can see from his moveset. Lots of suplexes, pile drivers, lariats, all kind of jumping and diving, drop kicks. If only all politicians was like this.
Yeah, I mean, he's got that wrestling moveset down. So you can see how this would have linked up with the Street Fighter series. It's got the same sort of gameplay, albeit transposed to a scrolling beat 'em up, but it's got the same moveset there, and you can see he was a precursor for Zangief, definitely.
Certainly. And he says nice little chunky sprites, which I always like, and you may hear me telling my love for massive chunky sprites a lot during the next few episodes. It's worth noting that the Mega Drive's answer to Final Fight was Streets of Rage and that entire series, and after playing this game for capture purposes, I kind of noticed that Streets of Rage actually kind of copies the enemy designs a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of Final Fight laid down a lot of conventions which other brawling games seem to follow for years afterwards. I mean, you've got a lot of similar, like, as you say, similar bad guys. You've got the bad guy who throws the dynamite. You've got a fat guy who charges you. You've got all these different ones which Streets of Rage more or less copied. And then you've got the level design. It seems like every brawling game wanted to have a subway level after Final Fight. Final Fight really sort of popularised and paved the way for this type of game. I mean, obviously it had been there on earlier systems, but Final Fight really popularised it.
Of course. And we just saw a few seconds ago that Hagar taking a nice bit of roast beef out of a dustbin on the street.
As you do.
Yeah, that's always a staple of scrolling beat 'em ups, the ability to eat things off the floor without dying or getting food poisoning.
And it was even on a plate and steaming, which is that's good to find that in the bin.
I mean, that could have been a homeless person's charity, really. But Hager, he just wants to make sure that he's well fed as he kicks ass on the streets.
He's the mayor; he can do what he wants.
So we see Hager kicking the arse of someone with ginger hair and a white top and jeans and some very, very strange boots. That, of course, it looks so weird because originally that person was, well, I guess a woman, kind of not, depending on where you are in the world. That basically is a censored version of a character called Poison, who is normally known for being a buxom punk woman who wears very little, and of course in various parts of the world it was revealed that she was in fact either a transvestite or a transsexual.
Yeah, and obviously courted controversy with Nintendo at the time because of their rather strict Nintendo seal of approval, seal of quality, which they stamped on all their games, which included being family friendly for all their titles and trying not to cause any controversy.
Of course, and we could do several episodes on Nintendo's efforts to clean up video gaming, and maybe we will at some point. But as I say, Poison was censored in this game. As you can see, it's okay to punch the crap out of people as long as they're not women.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to do that.
No.
I think that's Poison and indeed Hugo, who I think we'll see shortly as well. They both appeared in Street Fighter 3, so there's another link back to the Street Fighter series, so you can really see how Final Fight and Street Fighter did tie together quite closely at times. And
of course Street Fighter Alpha 3 also featured Cody as a character as well.
Yep, of course. I mean,
and Guy, the whole Alpha series featured Guy as well, just to think about it.
So, I mean, everyone's been in everything, and I mean now, even recently, you've got Hager turned up in the latest Marvel vs. Capcom, I think. And
deservedly so. The world needs more Hager.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just surprised we've never had another Final Fight game after the days of. I think Final Fight 3 was the last one.
Ah, no, the last one was the ill-fated Final Fight Streetwise on the PS2, which I've never played, but I've heard is an abomination and has probably killed off any chances of a sequel.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really quite the same, but I suppose the scrolling brawler did seem to die a death when 3D came around.
But I mean, it has had a resurgence in recent years in the 2D space with things such as Castle Crashers and Scott Pilgrim and a few other choice titles. So the genre's not entirely dead; it's just sleeping.
Yeah, it's something which works best in a more retro style, in keeping to 2D. So some games just don't translate brilliantly to a 3D atmosphere.
Certainly. So, of course, the question that needs to be asked is, are you a Hager or a Cody man, Robin?
Oh, definitely Hager. Whenever I play with one of my friends, we'd play all these brawling games, such as Final Fight, Streets of Rage, and even Rival Turf, one of the lesser-known series, which was very big in Japan. I'd always be the chunky guy, and he'd always be the quick one. So, yeah, Hager all the way.
Certainly. I mean, you got to go with the guy that can then suplex and power drive the best of them, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, because you didn't get the two-player option on this first Final Fight, you couldn't get the combination combining the speed of Cody and the power of Hager. But on the later versions, like Final Fight 2 and 3 on the Super NES, you could do that. You could actually, they did offer the two-player modes, thankfully, and it made for some good sort of cooperative play and attacks.
Certainly.
There you see Hugo, who, as I said before, appears in Street Fighter 3, albeit slightly didn't look quite as strange as he does in this game.
Yeah, for some reason he's called Andor here as well.
Which I think is a bit of a joke on Andre the Giant, if I remember correctly.
That would make sense. Similar.
So I mean, as you were saying earlier, you can just see when you do compare this to games on the Mega Drive, which Streets of Rage, it was very sort of dark and grimy. You had small characters with not a lot of detail, to be honest. But this game is massive sprites, lots of character, lots of colour, lots of detail. Just something which would grab you and draw you into the game a lot instantly, especially seeing it on the screen in the arcade. Something which just made you want to play it.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about some of the other brawlers that are around at the time this was in the arcades, I mean, you've got things like everything from Double Dragon to Bad Dudes versus Dragon Ninja, and nothing looks as good as this.
No, exactly. It was a revolution for the genre, really.
And of course, the only thing to really better in the graphic stakes would probably be Street Fighter 2 itself, a few years later.
Yeah, it was just the next evolution of the Capcom style, I suppose.
As you can see, I'm getting royally pounded by a group of people.
That's the only problem. Not playing it in single player is quite a different experience because you can't. It's much harder to manage everyone on screen. Having 2-player options in the arcade and stuff just meant you could work together to sort of deal with when you were getting crowded out. But then again, you do have those super moves by mashing the 2 buttons together, which allow you to power out of those desperate situations.
But of course, that does chop off a bit of your health as well, so it's only for dire situations, and even using it can make things a bit hairy for you later on.
Yeah, of course. You got to fight smart.
I mean, my tactic usually in these kind of games is a lot of drop kicks and a grab move every now and then if I can do that.
Yeah, they introduced a lot more grabs later on in the series. It did all seem a bit limited at this time, but back then you didn't have lots of fighting games with a huge array of moves in. I mean, as you say, Street Fighter 2 didn't come till after Final Fight, and the original Street Fighter had quite limited move sets, so you weren't really expecting to be able to do tons of different moves. You had enough. This was enough at the time it was released.
Yep, just one punch and a jump button. That's all you need for a bit of brawling.
Yeah. You didn't need a 6-button pad like the ones which they had to start developing specially for some consoles to deal with Street Fighter.
Well, it was either that or in the original Street Fighter game you had the pressure sensitive pads. So you had a punch pad and a kick pad, and the harder you hit them, the harder your punches would be. Yeah,
I mean that's something quite sort of technologically advanced for the time. Things to do with pressure and stuff. It's surprising those sort of control pads aren't used a bit more often, because you do get obviously some pads react to the amount of pressure you put onto them, but it was quite a good thing at the time, really.
Yeah. So we go fighting the boss of the second level. His name's Katana here, but his original name is Sodom, and you can kind of imagine why that was changed.
He of course appears in other Capcom fighting games as well.
Yep, Street Fighter Alpha, a few of those he's in there.
Yeah, so you can definitely see that what they were going for when they made this game, and how it linked back to their old titles. Oh, I mean how it would link to their future titles. Sorry.
Certainly, you can see me just dying at the hands of Katana. But joy on Hager's face as the dynamite is distinguished. So let's try Cody.
Yeah, it gives you a chance to try out the opposite. Of course, he's more of your basic fighting character, jeans and a white t-shirt.
Yep. Much like Axel in Streets of Rage. Your general all-rounder.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, Axel, you could almost say it's a straight lift from this, really. Very much the same character design. But then again, I suppose it's your everyman, your action game everyman.
Certainly. There we go, making use of a lead pipe.
Yeah, the use of weapons was another great thing at the time, and obviously you could see a lot better what you were throwing around or hitting people with because of the graphical improvements which you found with Final Fight from other beat-em-ups.
It was always good to have the lead pipe because that gave you a bit of range as well.
Yeah, of course. And the later games would offer a whole variety of different weapons and different ones which were ranged, other ones which you threw. I think you'd even get some explosive weapons further along the line.
I believe so.
Yeah, so and you can see how something like this developed into future games, such as I think Fighting Force on the PlayStation was one which I enjoyed, but it didn't do very well at the time. It was developed by Core. We get the team who did Tomb Raider.
Yeah, I'm sure it was originally supposed to be Streets of Rage 4 at one point as well.
Ah, possibly. I don't recall that myself, but yeah, you can see it's so close to these old games such as Final Fight and Streets of Rage. It had. I say it because it had a subway level and a train-based level, like we're fighting through now, and it had the big character, the fast character. But I think it just never really took the stride into 3D very well, or it just didn't catch on.
No, certainly not.
That was back in the days of very chunky, spiky 3D models. So it wasn't exactly the best looking game going around.
No. I mean, for an early SNES game, the graphics do hold up quite well. Everything looks quite nicely defined.
Yeah, you compare it to other later games on the SNES, you definitely wouldn't think this was a launch one.
No.
But then it's certain developers like Capcom and Konami, and of course Nintendo themselves, always just had, I think, set their bar a little bit higher, and their games always did just have that extra polish.
Of course. Remind me, I'm sure the ending involves pushing a guy in a wheelchair out of a building. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I haven't played the ending for a long time because obviously back when I used to play it a lot as a kid, it was tough. It was tougher. Games back then, they always seemed a lot harder. I haven't played it through for a long time. I can't remember that. Definitely should have looked that one up.
Yeah, it should have. I mean, if that is the case, that definitely puts Nintendo's censorship laws out of the window there.
You'd imagine that's something Nintendo would have come down.
I vaguely remember it. It's been a long time.
But I mean, you can see the influence games like Double Dragon had on this release, and I mean the Yoshiki Okamoto, who he was a producer on Final Fight, I believe. He said that the arcade version of Double Dragon 2 was actually his basis for Final Fight. It's what inspired him to make the game, what inspired him to take their Street Fighter game into the side-scrolling brawler genre. Obviously, this is how it ended, but it's those classic games which don't stand up as well as Final Fight nowadays.
No.
Would be inspiration for this one.
Of course, Double Dragon, while not being the original brawler of sorts, it certainly defined the genre for nearly a decade afterwards.
Yeah, it's the one which everyone remembered. It was an iconic name. It had the brothers. It was something. It just had a little something extra than all the other brawlers at the time.
I mean, Capcom did a lot more scrolling beat-em-ups after this. I mean, there were, I think it was Aliens vs Predator. There was Captain Commando. There's a couple of Dungeons and Dragons ones in the arcades.
Awesome games.
Yeah, so Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, I believe, was another one of theirs. So they really did a lot with the genre after this.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the ones, such as Cadillacs and Dinosaurs and the Double Dragon games, never made it to a home console, apart from in Japan, I don't believe. And it was, that's quite a loss because they sort of took what Final Fight had done, developed it, refined it a bit more, and it would have been fantastic to have seen them on. Whether it made it onto SNES or maybe had to wait for the PlayStation, it would have been a really great thing to have seen them release.
Certainly. Well, I think we're going to leave Cody scrapping away there while we just do our little outro. Once again, thanks to my colleague Robin Parker for joining me on this podcast. As usual, you can check out this video and all our other content on www.GodisaGeek.com. We now have a Twitter account, so you can follow us at the Retrocast. There you can have a look at when our next episode is up. There'll be quizzes, trivia, photos, all sorts of retro-related goodness. You can check us out on YouTube via the GodisaGeek TV brand. We'll be on iTunes now, on the GodisaGeek TV. And we're also on Blip TV as well, also under GodisaGeek TV. So hopefully we shall see you next week for another episode. And until then, happy retro gaming.
See you later.